All right. I had tried to get my computer synced to the correct time, so I thought it was 8:30, but so I guess we'll go ahead and call Hood River City Council meeting to order. It's 8:30, February 6th, and this is for our City Council annual work planning session, which I think quite a few people are pretty excited about. So looks like all of our councilors are here. And are we live? We are live. Okay. All right. Just wanted to double check that we are recording now. Okay. Wonderful. Welcome, you guys. Thank you for spending several hours on a Saturday morning to help us get this going this year. We had quite a year last year. We started out with great hopes and we got a lot of things done, but we had a few bumps in the road last year. And in some ways, we learned a lot because of that. And we did really well, I believe, despite everything that went on last year. And just hoping for a better year this year all the way around. So let's go ahead and get started. I think, Rachel, are you going to kick this off?
Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you for the introduction. I have a presentation to give to the council, and then I'll turn it over to the Mayor to lead the discussion. So let me get this started. And Jonathan, you let me know, please, if this is what it's supposed to be. Have you seen the right screen, Jonathan?
Yes, Rachel, it looks great.
Okay, thanks so much. Just interrupt me if all of a sudden it switches. So as the Mayor said, we're here to talk about the 2021 City Manager proposed City Council work plan. And let's see, now it's not moving. Great. And this is really why we're here today. The work plan makes your priorities clear to the organization and to the community and is our roadmap for the year.
Rachel, oh, great, perfect.
Did it move, Counselor? You can see the iceberg?
Did, but we're good.
Okay.
My mistake.
Okay. Policy making is really the tip of the iceberg, and over time affects the service delivery system, and it's where we'll spend our time today. But first, I'll give a brief introduction of city services, reflect a bit on 2020, and then leave the meeting to you to discuss the work plan for 2021. The organization spends most of its time on day-to-day service delivery. That's the portion of the iceberg that's under the water, and the city manager oversees this work. We have three basic categories of services: infrastructure, which is water, sewer, roads, and maintenance of physical assets, including parks, right-of-way, buildings, and equipment. The city owns and maintains more than $100 million in physical assets, and these community investments are leveraged for private investment in our community and our economy. So think houses, buildings, companies. And in 2020, the assessed value of these private assets was $1.1 billion. So maintaining and operating these assets, especially given some of the deficiencies, is an enormous responsibility and one that we take very seriously. We have the category of public safety. This is really our community insurance policy. These are the people who show up when something goes wrong, and the community can expect 24/7 emergency response from police, fire, and EMS. And then there's the category of community identity and standards. The city regulates the built environment through standards and regulations. And while it sounds mundane, these conversations really are about people's values, hopes, dreams, and aspirations for their community. The codes regulate things like how close we live together, how tall our buildings are, how much green space is woven through the community. Are we a walkable community, a bikeable community, or a drivable community? And then finally, there's an internal organizational infrastructure, finance, human resources, and administration that supports our service delivery system. The beginning of the year is a good time to reflect on the previous year, and 2020 certainly demands our attention. In May of 2020 and at the beginning of the pandemic, I outlined these goals and strategies for the remainder of the year. We stuck with our strategies and largely met our goals, and I'm very proud of the organization and our employees and our community partners for what was accomplished during this difficult year. We adapted city services to a remote or distance environment and implemented safety protocols for all city employees who could not work remotely, which is the majority of our workforce. We communicated with the community. We increased our social media followers by 30% and our email subscribers by 25%, and our webpage views increased by 143%. We responded to local protests for police reform. City Council adopted a resolution for equity and inclusion, and with the mayor's leadership and support from our police chief, we reviewed the use of force policies and use of force statistics for the Hood River Police Department. We made changes and communicated these to the community. We distributed $195,000 in CARES money, shoring up important community services that provided services to the community's most vulnerable residents. We created a program for use of the right-of-way to assist businesses affected by COVID, and we supported the Chamber's efforts to assist businesses. On behalf of the organization, we are proud and grateful to have been of service to the community during this past year. And with your leadership, we also made steady progress on the 2020 work plan, as you can see in the status report in your packet. Just a couple of highlights. We purchased land for affordable housing using grant funds and construction excise tax. We prioritized infrastructure projects, completing the design for the Cascade and Rand intersection, completing phase 1 of the waterfront stormwater line, and beginning a multi-year project to reconstruct failing sewer lines and replace water lines. We paid down city liabilities, including PERS, securing $400,000 in matching funds. We hired a social worker using grant funds to provide direct outreach to community members experiencing homelessness, filling an important and identified gap in services and strengthening our relationships with social services. City Council is in the process of modifying the zoning code to allow a more diverse mix of housing types citywide. And we created a safe routes to school map and bikeway. And together with the development community, we identified major barriers and roadblocks in our development review process, and we've created an action plan to address them. Strategic project management through the council work plan delivers community outcomes and results. So where are we today? Well, there is a light at the end of the tunnel of the pandemic. Vaccinations have become, and I think we're all optimistic about recovery, although it's certainly still uncertain. Unlike many cities, we have not had to reduce services, and our financial projections show that we will end the year with a 25% general fund ending fund balance. This is, of course, due to many years of prudent financial management and also combined with smart financial decisions, such as putting a hold on urban renewal collections, cutting spending, and holding positions open. One of the primary drivers, though, is that we run lean. For the past 3 years, we've actually had operating surpluses. Here's a slide of our major revenue trends. So you can see that COVID introduced a level of volatility into what it normally is steadily growing revenue sources. The revenue sources driven by consumer discretionary spending were down. Lodging tax and parking took the sharpest hit and have yet to recover. I think it is notable that we've been able to withstand a major decline in tourism affected revenues, largely because of our diverse mix of revenue sources. Also because the Columbia Cascade Urban Renewal District expired and came back on the property tax rolls, and because of the one-time property tax bump from a pause in urban renewal collections. This has helped offset other losses. We would expect that property tax would decline slightly or level off next year due to the one-time bump. So again, financial recovery will continue to be a challenge. And what began as a health crisis quickly became an economic crisis and a social justice crisis. And locally and nationally, our social contract has been tested and our social fabric has frayed. It's not just the pandemic, but we're in a period of significant social change throughout the country. Some have equated current days to the 1960s and further back to the Civil War and to the Gilded Era, all periods of incredible social and societal change. And I think it's worth just taking a moment to recognize the period that we're in. With your leadership, we can meet these challenges. We put financial policies in place before the pandemic, and these provide a clear roadmap for the organization for recovery. We will remain lean until we have some additional certainty about this recovery. And in addition to day-to-day services, the organization works on your collective priorities. The council work plan provides a focus on the outcomes that are important to the community, and you are our most important connection to the community. The collective prioritization that we're going to do today is one of the hardest and most important roles of a well-functioning city council. We are a small and lean organization. Most of our time is spent on operations, and we are still operating with significant constraints due to the pandemic. There will always be more work to do than we can do in a single year, and no organization can accomplish everything. The best city councils focus on the difference you want to make in your community and the changes you want to see over the long term. And I would encourage you, when you talk about this, keep it high level and phrase it in positive terms, because this helps others see the opportunity rather than the obstacles. Many of the outcomes that we'll talk about are community outcomes, and the city is only one player. Bringing these efforts together will require a focus on collaboration. City Council has a strong voice in advocating for other entities to help achieve these broader outcomes, including parks and open space, affordable housing, and community safety. This has been a very difficult year for so many in our community, and it's easy to see the problems that we have around us. But we must continue to focus on the positive and be optimistic about the future and keep getting better. With your leadership, we can create an aspirational and hopeful narrative about who we are and who we want to be as a community. And this must infuse everything we do. As we build this organization and serve the community, there will be ups and downs. Your positive support, leadership, and vision is our most important asset. Shifting back to the council work plan, again, policy making is the tip of the iceberg and where we're going to spend our time today. The proposed work plan, you've seen this before. It's a graphic from our 2020 work plan and talks about the inputs that go into the work plan. It incorporates input from the city council throughout the year. City staff propose projects. Projects emerged from regulatory requirements and mandates. Our standing council committees have provided a prioritized list of projects to meet council's stated goals. And this fall, we sought input from the public via an electronic and paper survey. The opportunity was promoted on our website, local media, social media, and via direct email. And finally, the work plan was vetted by me as a proposal that I believe accomplishes the most important work. A brief description of each project is included in your packet, but I'd like to highlight a few and then turn it over to you for questions and discussion. The city's work on housing over the past few years demonstrates the importance of focus and discipline over time. This year, we've proposed a project that would develop an affordable housing strategy. This involves identifying a shared understanding and common language of what we mean by affordable housing. Much of the city's work to date has been a market-based approach, which is important because increasing the supply of all housing is important to meeting our community's needs. But this project recognizes that relying on the market to produce a housing that is affordable for families at or below 100% of the median family income is simply insufficient, and that meeting this need will require a different set of tools. This work starts on Monday with a presentation by Echo Northwest. Following Monday's presentation, staff will scope a project, review it with council, and then begin to develop the affordable housing production strategy and an implementation plan. And speaking of strategies that don't rely on the market, we're in the process of building a development strategy for 780 Rand Road. You've given us direction to prioritize community members making 80% and below of the median family income for this project. We've just launched a website which outlines the steps taken to date and the next steps. Shifting gears a little bit, with your leadership, we are prioritizing the backlog of infrastructure issues in the community. This past year, we completed phase 1 of the waterfront stormwater pipeline replacement project. This is a multi-million-dollar complicated project that will completely reconstruct the waterfront stormwater system that also drains a portion of downtown. It will improve water quality and protect property. Over the next 8 or 9 years, the city will reconstruct water and sewer infrastructure within a significant portion of our community. This infrastructure is beyond its useful life. We have seen DEQ violations at the wastewater treatment plant, clogged sewer lines, and there is a state mandate to replace water lines. In many cases, these lines will need to be fully replaced, but wherever possible, we will be repairing rather than replacing. We're identifying where both water and sewer lines exist and replacing or reconstructing them at the same time wherever possible. And we may need to construct streets in some areas, which will lead to additional investment and also disruption for the community. You can expect more to come on this project, including financing, funding, and grant opportunities. Over the past 2 years, we've built the infrastructure necessary to accomplish this task, including new staff, operations and maintenance plans, and assistance with seeking grant funding and financing for these projects. This is an enormous undertaking and is in addition to the day-to-day operations and maintenance associated with our underground infrastructure. So with that, I will turn it over to the mayor to facilitate the discussion, and I will be available to answer any questions. Mayor, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen if that makes it easier for you to facilitate. Okay.
Sure.
You have the list in your packet.
Yep. First of all, thank you, Rachel, for that high-level overview of everything. You know, that just, we're not here to get in the weeds today, or we're going to try and stay out of the weeds. Let's just put it that way, as much as we can. You know, having that high-level overview of where we were, where we are, and you know the things we are planning on working on, at least from last year's work plan, is very helpful. And I want to thank Rachel specifically on the infrastructure, the last second to the last slide that you showed us on the water and sewer. You know, this has been a mandate by the state for a long time, way previous to Rachel being our city manager. And I have to say that really no previous city manager would take it on. And it was needed, it's needed to be done. It's very expensive, time consuming. It's really important, but really no one put it on the work plan to make it a priority previous to Rachel coming here. And it will be disruption in certain areas when these things get replaced and repaired. But I want to thank you for taking it on, because it is something that we need to keep our city functioning, and to keep the value of the private sector high in what we're doing and drawing new people here and businesses. We have to do it. And so thank you for taking it on. I just wanted to thank you for that, because it's a big project. And and thank you, Mark Janik, because you're going to be involved heavily in that. So I just wanted to thank you off the bat for that anyway. So let's go ahead with questions. If people have any questions for Rachel, I guess, to start off with on her presentation. Well, I see all head shakes, no questions. Wow. Okay, Gladys.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to make a comment. Just Rachel, thank you for your leadership. 2020 was definitely a challenging year, but it took all of us to make it work, and you primarily for helping orchestrate all of it. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Councilor. It really was a team effort from the City Council on down to every single person in this organization. And again, we are grateful and proud to have been of service. Thank you. I will pass that along to the organization.
Well, we don't have any questions, I guess. We've got in our packet numerous pages of the work plan. I think page 7 through 13 are 7 through 12 are actually is the proposed work plan with kind of by specific quarter what we would try and accomplish. Just off the bat, I'd love to be able to accomplish all this. I know some of it will still be ongoing in 2022 for sure. And it's ambitious. And we have a lot of meetings scheduled. We have urban renewal meetings scheduled. We have extra presentations scheduled. You know, it's going to be a lot of work for all of us. And I think we're up to the task of this. I guess I'm not sure how long we're going to be on Zoom, but I think it's going to be for quite some time, which does save us some time getting to meetings. We can just turn on our computer and here we are all together. So I think that kind of helps in some ways, but I don't like not being together in the same room, but we'll deal with it. So does anyone have anything? You know, we kind of have all of these items: affordable housing, Rand Road, zone code change, equity, community health. You know, we've got all these things in here that Rachel has proposed that we're going to work on. Some will finish this year, some will go over to 2022. But does anyone have a specific question about how this is all going to be put together, or consternation about one of these? Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Kate. I think that if we discussed each of these categories, I certainly have scope of work questions or comments on most of them, and I expect that the others do too. So I guess it's just a process question for today: is how do you want to how are we going to do the discussion of each of these categories? I don't have any new categories. That's good.
Okay. Let's just ask, does anyone have any new categories? Or does, you know, everyone okay with these, and they can fit whatever whatever concerns they had under a category already? I think everyone is shaking their head, no new categories. Tim.
I guess I have a kind of a similar comment to Mark's, and you know, I think all of the categories are great, but I think the devil's in the details. And I guess a question for Rachel is given the way that it's laid out here in this document, is it do you know, obviously I think you've proposed something that you feel that we can fund and is fundable within the context of our current budget. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question, Counselor. We will build the budget based on your policy direction.
Mhm.
And we've made it clear where there may need to be some additional investment. Given the volatility right now, we're going to have to hold off on that, on really a firm answer to that question until we get closer to the budget.
Right. So, for each one of these categories, obviously there's a variety of different scopes of involvement and projects that could be conducted. And so I guess to follow up on Mark's question is how do we go from where this document is to having a really well-defined, fundable list of projects?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Counselor. I think this really speaks to a higher level question of how we do our policy work. And I see this as an area of improvement for the organization. Each of these are specific projects. But what we need to do is come back and make sure that the projects themselves meet the outcomes that you want to see. So we would do this in a subsequent meeting with council on each project. So a policy development meeting, a council workshop meeting, where we would bring a scope for each project, get your direction and input, and then go from there.
Thank you. That's
so yeah, these are the projects that we will be working on, and scoping would come later.
Thank you.
So I have a question on the same lines as Tim's, just to kind of add on to that, and then Gladys right after me. A lot of these, or some of these, have monies that will need to be spent, say for instance, on a consultant. And we may have enough money and we may not. And if we had enough money to get every consultant for every project, that would be great, but we may not, depending on the budget. So I think what we may be looking at today is, if we have, 7 different categories, are there some categories that we would rather spend the money on if we don't have enough money? What will be cut money-wise if we don't have enough for consultants for every single thing? Is that what you'd like to?
Mayor, we will build the budget based on your direction today. And
okay.
Based on your direction. And this is intended to be a realistic list. I have made it clear in some of the areas where additional investment would be needed. But otherwise, this is intended to be realistic. At this point in the year, I believe we can build a budget based on this. Now, if the scope of the projects grows, then we'll have another conversation, but this is intended to be realistic.
Okay, Gladys, did you have a question?
Yeah, just similar to the same questions that everyone is asking, because we do have we are thinking about everything through a racial inequity, social justice lens, that we are very intentional about who the consultant is. Preferably, if it was someone here local, there are agencies here that do help with this sort of co-facilitation. So I just wanted to add that in there, that I would strongly prefer to hire a local consultant to really help us facilitate these meetings that will take place.
Thanks, Gladys. We'll keep that in our tool chest for when we get to that later on. Okay. I wasn't going to specifically go through every single one of these, but Mark, you kind of indicated you thought maybe that's what we should do or wanted to do.
Well, I think each category, so inclusive and diverse housing, what are the, not specifics, but what are the big pictures things we're thinking about? And I think that would, if we can find, consensus on each of those things, it feels valuable to me, as opposed to saying this specific, skipping over specific programs. I do think some of them are so known that not much discussion would be required, but as far as projects, but the categories certainly seem valuable.
Okay, So maybe, maybe we just, and we're not at this point anyway, prioritizing inclusive and diverse housing over equity and inclusive community, or, you know, multimodal. We're not putting this is first, this is second, this is third. These are just a list and they aren't prioritized. So, and Rachel has stated that she believes these are realistic right now, the way they sit, to get them done. Or some of these say we will go into 2022 already. So, you know, we will move them forward and they will continue on in 2022. So she feels that this is realistic for us to be able to accomplish. So let's just go with page 7, first one, then, unless people want to do something different. No, okay. No one's protesting that. So I'm just announcing these things for people that are listening and can't see us, and it's recorded and they don't know what's going on. So we've got the inclusive and diverse housing inventory. We've got 3 categories: affordable housing production, Rand Road development, and zoning code improvement project. So are these?
Mayor,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but just it's maybe semantics, but the category that's based on the goals that you've set previously, those 3, you've called them categories, those are projects. Those are actual projects that will be scoped. So those are the projects that we're proposing to work on.
Okay. And we have been working on these 3 previously. And I guess I just need some head nods or comments on, we still want to work on inclusive and diverse housing inventory. First of all, I'm going to go through you guys and call on you, each one of you, for this. You still want to work on this, and these 3 projects are projects that you feel are good projects, or you have a comment one way or the other on them. So I'm just going to go on my screen at this point. Jessica?
I did not have any questions or comments on these ones. I understood them.
Okay. Mark?
Thanks. I just want to sort of go back to our 2015 housing thing, and you know, give us kudos for getting as far as we're going, but then make one comment. One is, you know, I'm fully supportive of these 3 things. I'm fully supportive of the effort. The middle housing stuff that we're going through right now is great, and it's one of the legs of the stool that we talked about over the last 5 years. The affordable housing production, I just want to, you know, from the beginning it was, we were going to count on partners and facilitate partner agencies to lead with that, because we don't have the staff or the expertise in-house to, you know, do developments and stuff. And that still feels like the right thing to do to me. I think that what we're going to do on Monday and having this be a project is a task within this thing is great, but it should really be focused on facilitating partners to build the, you know, 120 and down housing versus us doing it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I think, Mark, you mentioned, you know, our Eco Northwest presentation on Monday. And I think that's the beginning of us getting enough information. That's just one portion of us getting enough information to figure out who and how we can specifically partner. If I have that incorrect, Rachel, let me know.
Yeah, this would identify the policy tools that will assist the partners in developing affordable housing. There are tools at the City Council disposal. Many have been identified through the previous work, but we do need to determine which ones we're going to enact and then how we're going to implement them in partnership with our other community partners.
To address your question, Mark. Anything else, Mark? Megan?
Yeah, so I I guess going back to the big level, obviously very supportive of inclusive and diverse housing inventory as a category strategy. These 3 projects I'm absolutely on board for. Obviously, we're already working on Rand Road, and I'm excited for that. The other 2, well, we've been working in those areas, are new projects, and I think they're both really important for us to kind of get a handle on how to move forward and make some real progress. So I'm supportive.
Great. Tim?
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, of course, this is a great category. I look forward to the discussion on Monday, because I think that will be very important to figure out exactly how we're going to actually achieve something that really, it seems to be elusive for a lot, if not most, communities in our situation. So I'm looking forward to that discussion. With respect to the third one, I think it's great. I think I understand how that project will could potentially result in a more inclusive and diverse housing inventory. But just to make it more clear, Rachel, can you just provide a brief synopsis about how doing that project will achieve that goal?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question, Counselor. I think this could be, this could fall under the category of market-based approaches, because the goal really is to simplify and streamline our code and land use process. It can be a barrier now, given some of the complexities in our code.
Do you see an intersection between number 3 and number 1?
Great question. I mean, even, affordable housing producers still need to go through the land use process. So absolutely. And again, any housing production will be helpful to meeting our overall goals. So I do think this one straddles both market-based and non-market-based approaches.
I guess my final question would be, given the 3 items in this category, which one do you think is going to take the most time?
Well, that's an interesting question, Counselor. With regards to number 3, this is one of those projects where scoping is going to be very important. I think you have experienced some of the complexities of the land use system and our code. You think about some of the hearings that have come before you recently, and some of those complexities have been identified. So that one's going to depend on the scope and what we find when we do this initial analysis. The Rand Road development project would certainly take a lot of time and effort, but we've got a good partner and that's well underway. And affordable housing production, it's really again, it'll depend on the scope and how we choose to implement it. So I think I sidestepped that question, but that's a little more detail.
And I appreciate that. And just trying to get a general feel for how you feel about that. Thank you.
Goddess?
I fully support this. Very excited about all 3 projects. The only change that I would suggest for it to read equitable and diverse housing, being very intentional about social justice in general and being very intentional with the language that we use. So that's the only suggestion or change that I would prefer to see.
Thanks, Gladys. Eric?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is a great topic. I think addressing our housing shortage has been a top priority of council since well before I joined council. I think these 3 projects are all appropriate and good. I think we're also appropriately focused, at least primarily on addressing the shortages at 120% and below, because I think that's where the need is, of course, but also just my sense of the local market in Hood River for sort of the middle and high is that Hood River is increasingly becoming attractive at not only a regional but a national level, and that is just pushing prices way up, and the folks at the lower end are receiving the brunt of that. So I think focusing our efforts and resources on 120% and below is the appropriate thing to do, as well as doing whatever we can to foster relationships with developers for multifamily. It seems like in the 70s and 80s, there was an explosion of apartments. We seem to not have that occurring here. So maybe that's a function of interest rates, I'm not sure, but whatever we can do to foster professional, nice multifamily with developers would be ideal in my mind. And we seem to be doing that, particularly on to project number 2, of which I'm very and fully much in support, as well as 1 and maybe 3. So I think it's a good list, and I encourage us to continue working on this topic.
Great. Thank you,
Mayor?
Council. Go ahead.
Mayor, may I ask a clarifying question? Because Councilor Haney, that you brought up an important point with regard to multifamily housing. And as you know, we've seen recently some new multifamily housing projects. If it was the direction of council, actually fostering those relationships is something that staff could begin to do. I would want to make sure, just would ask that we get some clear direction from council on that before we actually start building those relationships, but certainly something we can do.
Gladys?
With that being said, is there a certain point where, we are talking about, in regards to housing, adding like deed restrictions and who we are working with for like a land trust, or is that going to take place at the work session?
Thanks, great question. Those are some of the tools that we'll be talking about starting on Monday. What are those relationships? What are the policy tools, and what kind of certainty do we need to ensure, commitment do we need to have in order to use some of those tools?
Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, just tagging on to Eric's point about private development of multifamily, apartment type things. I would be, I'm always sort of mystified of why it doesn't pencil out. And I think that if we as an organization, if we had a small goal of just understanding what are the economic hurdles that are making that not, why isn't private development building that housing type? And if we understood why, then there might be things we can do about it in the future. But as far as I don't have an answer of why that isn't an attractive thing to do. And if we knew that, there might be something we can do about it. So like a baby step towards facilitating it is to understand why aren't they building it now? So.
Jessica?
Just to share some thoughts. One, I've heard that a lack of comparables has made it difficult. Like there's not been anything built in so long, so people don't want to lend for these projects because it's an unproven. But we do have, there's 2 big ones in the works that might even happen this year, and the hope is that they would open up the gates for others to follow. And then I want to say I would support Gladys's comment about changing the word inclusive to equitable.
Okay. Megan?
So I will also support that. I think that's great to improve our language and our shared use of it. Moving back to the high level of multifamily, I'm absolutely supportive of us, building relationships and having conversations with folks. That seems like a great step if it's within the realm of staff resources and capacity to do.
Okay. Tim?
I guess just one final thought is that as we go through all of this, that we also keep an eye on the environment and try to limit to the largest extent possible the effect of increased development on our environment.
Okay. All right, let's go to, if we're done with this one, it looks like we've kind of discussed that one. An equitable, inclusive community. And so we have a couple projects under that category. Equity assessment plan and community health and behavioral health partnerships. And we've already started, you know, our last meeting, or was it the meeting before? I lose track of these. We have so many Zooms. That we had a presentation from the Center for Living. So that was, you know, one step towards that. We had a homeless stakeholder group, and we're able to hire a social worker. And I believe that work's going to continue on into the future. So, I mean, we are doing these things right now and working with community partners. And maybe, Rachel, you could just talk through the equity assessment plan just a little bit on how that might work.
Sure, Mayor, thanks for the question. The first step here is, I think, to really determine a shared vision and shared language. Government exists to do those things that we can't do individually. And so co-creating this with our community is going to be really important to understand within the context of city services, what does this mean? So we're really looking forward to this work, and it will require some additional resources and partnering with folks who are trained in this strategic work. So the first step will be to get an RFP out for a partnership, and then we'll move forward from there.
Great, thanks for that explanation on that. So let's just go through everyone on this one, high level, equity and inclusive community. And then we have 2 projects under that category. So comments or questions on that? Let's see, Jessica?
I like the projects that are there. Sorry, thought I pushed the button. I like the projects that are there, and I appreciate Rachel's leadership and helping come up with really, this concept of helping educate us on the community health and behavioral health partnerships. Because it's not clear really what the role of the city is. I don't really see us as, hiring a bunch of behavioral health specialists, but how can we help the community, bring everybody together for those gaps. So I appreciate these projects. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to call on you guys in a different order because you seem to be jumping around on my screen every so often. Eric?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think both of these projects should be on this list, and I'm glad to see them on this list. With respect to the community health and behavioral health partnerships, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, Rachel, but I had a conversation with the city manager the other day about this, and she asked me a question or made a point that really struck home, which is when we bite off number 5, we should keep in mind what is the problem we're trying to solve. And I'm actually not sure precisely what it is. I do sense a strong feeling in the community that we need to be doing more in mental health generally. I hear that from different individuals, different professionals, different institutions, colleagues on council, and I certainly would like to do more, but not but I'm not in a position of intelligence to know exactly what the problem is we're going to solve. So finding out exactly what the problem is to solve seems like an important key part of number 5. And what I'm hearing it might be is maybe what we need is some kind of short-term housing solution for folks in mental distress, some kind of housing situation. And so, and that sounds like a big project, but if that's what the community needs, that's what the community needs. So for number 5, I think it's focusing on what the problem is, organizing the community around solving it, and it might be some kind of mental health housing situation that might even be regional, not just in our specific city. But I'd like to, well, I guess what I'm trying to say on number 5 is I would like to be more intelligent before being specific on that, because I feel like I'm not there yet personally, but that's a really important thing for us to be focusing on.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I think we're gathering information as a council right now. So I feel too that I don't have all the information I need to make great decisions on exactly what we need, but gathering more information so we can make intelligent decisions is important, and that's what we're trying to start with anyway. Gladys?
Thank you, Mayor. I like both of these because I don't really see like a timeline or a guesstimate of a timeline for number 5. I too was wondering how we as a city continue to play a partner, a partner to all of our behavioral health consultants and experts here in the community. Because as you guys have seen by all the comments, this is something that our community feels very strongly about as well. And I just think that it's the right thing to do for us to simply be aware of the barriers, identifying them, and then again, how do we as a city play a partner to continue the collaboration? And I think that should continue regardless on anything and everything that we have going on, that we do this collaboratively. So even if it is a regional approach, then we're in as well. That way we can come up with more solutions to help the outcomes of our community members. So thank you.
Thanks, Gladys. Megan?
Yeah, I think both of these are really great projects. See the overarching goal I'm very supportive of. I'm actually really excited for these because kind of in the realm of what Eric was saying, I think actually for both projects, building the shared language and the shared understanding and the same set of facts and reality, like it is not an area that I'm an expert at. I think it's not an area most of council's an expert at. So I think it's a really important and very exciting starting point to launch on what we're talking about, what it all means, and where the gaps are. Yeah, I think it's going to be really great.
Great, Megan. Tim?
Thanks, Mayor. Just back up what all the other councilors have said so far. Maybe to get at Eric's point, maybe for these in the future, maybe these could be kind of like prefaced with a brief problem statement or some brief background on what problem we're trying to address. And that might be helpful along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I'm so totally on board and excited to get at these projects. I think that they're just really, really important. And honestly, you know, part of me is starting to like look at this work plan and trying to see all the arrows that go between all the different elements. And there's there's all these interrelationships between these items. So yeah, I think that, you know, in that context, you know, it's kind of like a very big building block towards making our city a better place. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to go to Mark and then I'll come back to you, Gladys. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think I love that we're all pretty much on the same page. I think that having a clear eye towards equity and inclusion is something we do or need to continuously improve with everything. I think these are two good projects. I am a little bit worried that the city will be put in a position where the community wants us to own these things. And I think that partnership is really, really, really the key thing. You know, we and you know, a bunch of others said the same thing, but you know, it's like, why don't we have a mental illness, you know, house for 10 people? That, you know, that's just not where the city's gonna, you know, I'm worried about us taking on too much, while supporting the efforts to be a good partner with all these different entities to bring solutions. So.
Thanks. Gladys, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer reassurance to my peers as far as like, what is the problem? You know, I have the privilege that I get to do this for work. Counselor Mehta, same, where we are a part of these conversations. And I think the more you're hearing from community partners, the more you will see what the problems are. So I just wanted to offer reassurance that you'll see it. You'll see it the more that we have these presentations and the more we hear back from community members themselves.
Thanks, Gladys. You know, unless I have something drastically different or something I feel that I need to add in, I usually do add in when I feel like I need to, but I agree with all of you on this one. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of explanation, because I agree with all the comments that have been made about these two particular projects, and I think they're important.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
could I jump in here on
Yeah.
the community health and behavioral health partnerships?
Sure.
I just want to reiterate some of what has been said, so I make sure we understand. We are in no way suggesting that the city own this, and I hope that's clear. There's a lot of good work happening already in the community within both the behavioral health system and the medical system, and so just tapping into that and being a strong partner in that is what is intended. So staff would do that work and then report back to council if there's an identified need, or I should say when there's an identified community need, as Councillor Haney mentioned, so that we can then have a conversation about what's appropriate for the city. Where does council want the city to be a partnership? So just to clarify.
Great, thanks for a little more clarity on that one. That's helpful. Let's see, we have informed and engaged community. And it was great to hear that we are doing better. Last year we did a lot better with our communication, people getting information from us and having information on Facebook and notices that went out. You know, that might change as people get out more and aren't kind of stuck at home getting their social media fixes every day. So we need to, and I think some of the, just for whoever's listening, I went through every single page of all the comments, and I'm sure that most of our counselors did that. Similar comments last year, I believe similar comments the year before. We're continuing to work on a lot of these things, but the communication, some of the questions and comments, I did notice that I like, wow, gosh, we took care of that problem, or we discussed that 3 meetings ago, or, you know, so people aren't getting all the communication that we have, because all of our Zoom meetings are, you know, on the internet. You can get those and listen to those. So for this informed and engaged community, I think there's some people that feel that we don't have enough information out, although we're doing way better than we were. So I'm interested in hearing you guys' thoughts on this one. Let's see here. Megan?
Yeah, obviously important to keep working on. We have work to do. I'm glad this is kind of just the ongoing. We're going to really work on the, you know, some plans we already have and making new plans as you know, time and capacity allows. I did just want to commend city staff of my read of all of the survey results was that this was, while there's still plenty of work to do, this was the most positive of people were saying, oh, I'm actually seeing progress and improvement. which was nice to get some positive feedback from the community. So I want to make sure that that's passed on to everyone who's been working on this for the last few years. But yeah, I'm very supportive of moving forward and continuing to work on that.
Great. Jessica?
Yeah, I guess this may be more of a question for Rachel. On the paragraph sounds good, and the line below it is kind of just focused on one piece of the paragraph. I think so. It's just that the continuous improvement is we're not going to drop any of that, right?
Thank you, Counselor, for the clarification. You're right. We are not going to drop any of it. As I sort of said at the beginning, this is an area of continuous improvement. This is an area where some additional investment would be helpful as we continue to get better on communication and effective community engagement. Effective community engagement really does take time, and it takes some additional resources. So that's a conversation that we'll continue to have. I also want to get back to what Councillor Saunders said. Thank you very much. I will certainly pass that along to the organization. But it is really council who has prioritized this and provided the resources to do things like get a new website. And we just saw, as you saw, an incredible increase in website traffic. So we are able to communicate much more effectively because we've had the tools and because it's prioritized. So just want to acknowledge that.
Great. Tim?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, very supportive and thankful that we're making progress. I guess one of the things that I wonder about is, if we're going to provide, these our meetings as videos. Is there, I don't know, and I don't know the answer to how to do this. But is there any thoughts to having a translation
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. Certainly something that we can look at as we get this new a new software that will help us with the meeting management. Certainly something we can look at.
Yeah, that's one thing that I saw that was missing from the paragraph.
Gladys?
Thank you, Councillor Cunahan. That's one of the first points that I was going to mention. I don't see anything on here where it says that our information will be bilingual in both English and in Spanish. I also would like to see something along the lines of ADA accommodations. And as far as like the social media, being aware of equitable opportunities and that not everyone has access to the internet. What are other efforts such as social media, the power of Facebook Live, that's been really effective. So I don't know if we're going to have a meeting to kind of give our suggestions or about like what technologies or what social media efforts are taking place.
That's not something that we had planned, but certainly we are always open to feedback from the City Council on what's most effective. And you're right. The mayor's recently been on Radio Tierra, and that was live streamed. Our fire chief, our police department, they've all been on Radio Tierra, and that's all been live streamed and very successful. So again, the intention is to simply continue the work and continue to improve the work that we're doing in this space.
That would be really nice to just include that in there, like radio communications such as KIHR and Radio Tierra. That way our community is seeing that this is what we're doing now and that we will continue to build off of that.
Gladys, when you say that, are you saying that we would just make sure that the community knows we are on those communication
I just don't think as a city we have to reinvent the wheel about communications. There's already models out there that exist. There's community partners that are getting a hold of people and they are connected to them. So let's tap into that as a partner ourselves and just collaborate with what's already happening. And if we have more resources to provide to make sure that these materials are in English and in Spanish, and that we are popping it on our website, or that there's a designated area where community partners can help direct folks. You know, there's a lot of outreach going on these days about testing and vaccines and whatnot, and folks are having tablets that have internet built in with them, and they can share links with individuals in real time on site, wherever it is that they're going. So let's really just, again, tap into our community partners that are already doing communication, and then let's just replicate or tag on to what they're already doing.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I also want to provide kudos for the website and even within the building process, having applications and stuff be now more and more accessible through that electronic means. I think it's a great path we're on, and I look forward to continuous improvements. I think, it's something that just, you got to keep changing and keeping it fresh or people fall off, right? So it's never ending, but this is really good stuff. So thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Eric?
I'll join Mark and others in that comment. I really have seen a qualitative improvement in the city's technology. Maybe that's not quite the right word, but just the substance of the communications and the different ways it's going out seems to have qualitatively improved significantly, which is not just good for communications, but I'm thinking of other emergency events that have happened over the last year or so. I remember there was a water boil event several months ago. We had power outage, we had the fire, and it just seems that people were able to go onto the website, people were able to go into their Facebook feed and get information close to real time. So I think that it's also a public safety issue. And we're not the only ones. I think the school district has a very robust broadcast of information system. They actually seem to tap into text messages, and it's something we could consider doing. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just trying to say our community, not just the city, but broadly, seems to be doing a really good job communicating, which during COVID times is made, which is all that much more important. I'll come back to that in a second. But looking at the specific project for implementing what we sort of have as a result of COVID by happenstance, we'll have when we get back to normal through these new technologies. I think that's great. I know that people in our community have advocated that. In fact, I see, so I'll mention her name, Tracy Thomas Ball. I think she's advocated that, and I've appreciated her advocacy of that. So I think moving that project along is good. It's good to be on video and to have those things recorded so that people can listen in, not just during the time of meeting because people have to work, et cetera, and have family obligations. If I could just have a couple comments though around what I think is an important topic of the moment, given the COVID situation we've all been in for a year, and the idea of community engagement and communication, because I really think that we've all become isolated, both on council, but just as a society. And it just seems important to me to just acknowledge the lack of ability to interface with our community, with the people who elected us. I feel isolated. I know others must be feeling this way. And it's just sort of humankind was not supposed to be isolated like this. We are a social creature, and it's hard to do our jobs when we can't interface with people. So I'm not insisting anything. I'm not saying any timeline or this or that. I just would like to suggest we have a goal of getting back together when we can. And I'm sure we all feel that way, but I think it really is important for us to be able to see each other, to be with each other, to share human moments, with our constituents, because that's really what community is. And we're all just on our Zoom screens. It's hard to connect and come to consensus and things. So, and it goes to other things in our community, like there's all these events that we're not having, like Families in the Park, like Music Festival of the Gorge. you can get people together. I mean, just, and I don't mean to be too abstract here, but the lack of art and music in our world, in our community, turns people away from each other. I mean, there's people that can have diametrically political views. They can listen to Tom Petty and be friends. I mean, I don't mean to be so silly about it, but there's something special about these events, Families in the Park, Music Festival of the Gorge, you know, music and art. And that the lack of that, I think, is a problem, and is part of why I think we have so much disagreement in societies, because we don't have these shared experiences. So COVID itself is making things worse in terms of our community connectedness. And that's in one sense obvious, but maybe in a deeper sense, not so much. So as we make all these important policy decisions, I'm just missing interactions with the people at the Rotary Club or whatever our groups are, so we can engage. So I guess I just mean to suggest here, we should set a goal of getting back together when we can. And that's not me pounding the table. That's just me saying we should aspire to that, and to do what we can as a policy making body to get our community talking with one another, so we can understand and appreciate each other.
Thank you, Eric. That was powerful, Eric. I feel the same way, and I'm sure a lot of the rest of the counselors do too, that we want to get back to in-person ASAP. Who knows when that's going to be, but I don't think anyone would disagree with you. But thank you for stating that publicly, that it is important, that it will bring people together if we can be in the same room together. You know, I just, some of the classes I'd taken about communication said, well, the first thing you need to do is break bread together. You know, if you can break bread together, no matter what the conversation is from then on, is you've just de-escalated every difference you have if you can break bread together, sit across the table from each other. So thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think this is a great goal. You know, we'll have to spend some more money on technology, but that's what we need to do, especially at this point when we can't do in person, and especially people that can't come to our meetings in the future. So it's a good idea that you know, we can spend some more money on technology so they can get to us through technology if they need to. All right, Rachel, do you have anything to add?
No, Mayor, thank you very much for the conversation.
Okay. Efficient, safe, multimodal transportation system. We've got 3 projects. The historic Columbia River Highway will be connected, not next year, but soon enough. We're getting closer and closer to that reality, which is going to bring a lot more people into our town through a different avenue. Fixed local bus route and safe routes to school. So if I could just get people's comments on those. Jessica?
I had a couple questions or things in this topic area. One was, I think it was clear to me from all the comments that people really don't understand what multimodal means. I use that word all the time at work, but I was thinking that maybe we should spell it out a little bit. It seemed like a lot of people didn't realize that that also meant transit. So I would say maybe we should spell out maybe what the different modes are in our goal. On the safe routes to school one, it's kind of more of a question for Rachel, perhaps. So I know, there's a committee, it's a Safe Routes to School committee, and I would just make sure that we're working closely with the committee as we're developing these projects and not just on our own. Is that intended?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are spearheading the committee with ODOT. We have staff people appointed to that, and the next step will be to come back to council with a list of projects for some prioritization. But school districts involved, I believe Kathy's on it. So absolutely.
Okay, great. And then the one question I had under here that, looking at our projects from last year, to ask really is, should we be doing more on the parking study? I'm just thinking like, we spent a lot of time on this, the plan, and maybe it's happening and we just aren't seeing it and we don't need to be involved. But I want to make sure that all of the time that we spent in creating that doesn't get lost. Yeah, so a question, I guess, for Rachel.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's a great question. What was produced was an action plan. So the organization will continue to work on implementing those items. You'll remember we took the replacement of some of the Duncans out of the budget last year because of COVID, but that's very much on our plan still, as well as the pay by plate automated system. We are working on that as well. So we're happy to provide an update at any point if council would like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's good to know that we're still tackling that action plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, parking, as you saw in the revenue graph, has been one of those revenue sources that really has taken a big hit. So, while we're still very much working on those projects, you're right, it has not been the priority this year, but we can certainly provide an update to council.
Thank you.
I think one of the other things that was on that list, as you're mentioning that, Jessica, was better signage to get people they needed to go instead of circling blocks trying to find parking lots or different things, and more consistent signage. And I think that was something that was kind of in the beginning, between the beginning and the middle of the plan. And but of course, COVID kind of hit and we don't have as much revenue, and so that is on the back burner. But I'd like to, hopefully within the next year or 18 months, we'd be able to start back on that signage portion.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. This is also an important conversation for the Urban Renewal Commission to have, which is many of you, but there is still there's quite a bit of funding left in Cascade, in the Columbia Cascade Urban Renewal District, to potentially address some of these parking issues. So
Okay.
more to come on that. Thanks for the feedback there.
And just one last comment. I did want to say that I'm really glad that the working with CAT on the bus stops is on here, because we've heard, especially through the comments, it's an important project for the community and for CAT. So thank you.
Right. Megan?
Yeah, obviously high level, I think all three of these projects are great. Yeah, COVID-19 has certainly been a challenge for our local public transit. When I feel like they were just getting to the point of like, oh, it's a super cool, really getting to broad-based use. So I think it's great that we're going to be working on improving that system with them. So I'm good with everything.
Great. Gladys?
Thank you. I will echo Councilor Mehta's sentiment on multimodal. I think just plain language in general, and remembering that for just all of any paperwork that we release. I did want to mention, I'm looking at the number 8 for CAT, and I don't see anything about sheltered stops. And I know that that's something that has come up, and I recall we discussed that last year at our last council work plan. So maybe just adding that piece in there. And then in regards to the safe routes to school, piggybacking off of Councilor Mehta's conversation about signage, making sure that signage is in English and in Spanish. But, we know that not all kids can afford bikes, right? So I don't know if somewhere in here there's a plan to some extent, I don't know, reach out to like Nike or the Providence Foundation, or, even to the Health Council on how do we help with that? How do we partner? We might not necessarily own all of it, right? But how do we help meet that need, as there may be children who don't have the same equitable opportunities as their peers. Other than that, this looks beautiful. Thank you.
Mayor, could I answer the question on shelters? Happy to make it more explicit, but it is a plan to develop some criteria for shelters along with the engineering, design that would go into it. So that is included in there.
And I think as we develop the criteria for how we will determine where the bus stops will be and what kind of a bus stop it would be, whether it would be a bench or whether it would be a bench in a shelter, there might be different criteria. For instance, if we have a wide sidewalk, we'd like, yeah, we need a shelter here. There's a lot of people that would use that. But we may say, well, we really need a stop here, but there is no room for a shelter in this particular spot. So I don't think it'll mean every single spot will have a shelter, but we'll make criteria so that if we have space available and it's a big stop, that we can, have a shelter. But those are the discussions we'll have when we get to that point. So we will discuss shelters for sure in the future. Let's see, Mark?
Yeah, thanks. I like all three of these things. I think emphasizing that the local bus routes is really a CAT project and we're a partner to them versus the other way around, I think is important, just so we don't, all of a sudden our mission is buses in town kind of thing. I would ask that we add, even though I understand that and agree that staff has it on their radar to work on the parking plan stuff, it was something I would ask that we actually use it included in this list of things that just we're implementing the parking plan. It doesn't mean to do anything different, but I think that it was a very public process, and we had these very defined list of things to do that we're intending to work through. But if it's just staff work, it doesn't show up. And we saw within the comments a whole bunch of, this is the third downtown parking plan that you guys just shelved, right? And that's not true, but that's the perception by some of the folks downtown. And by just listing it as, number 7A or something in that list, and saying that, yes, we're working through the things suggested in the parking plan, I think would be beneficial communication wise. And to that end, I think that getting the parking committee together on a, even whether it's an hour every 6 months to just say, this is what we're doing. Do you have any inputs? What are you feeling? Because that was a group of downtown community members, as well as some of us. And I think that would, again, sort of tie in that it's an act, it's a living thing. And I believe that would be in our best interest to publicize it that way.
Thanks, Mark. I think that's probably a good idea. I sometimes when people say, well, we aren't implementing the parking plan, it just means we haven't built a structure, which we have a whole huge list of things to do prior to doing that, as our parking plan said. Having it on there.
What we are doing, right?
Yeah, we are doing things. I mean, having the app, that was one of the first things that we did. Changing some of the parking lot structures and prices, that we already did that. I mean, there's things we've already done, but they aren't super visible. Unless you came to every single council meeting, you might not catch those things that we've already done. So thanks, Mark.
I appreciate that input and feedback, and yeah, we can absolutely add that. Thanks very much. And perhaps put some more information up on our website so it's available. Yeah, thanks for that.
Great. Eric?
Yes, I had, when the very beginning of the meeting, as someone asked, should we have anything that's not on this list? I almost mentioned parking because I didn't notice it. So I've written down in my notes at least to have it be in significant operational projects, which is page 13. But whether it's there or in the plan, just as a implementation bullet, I agree with that, because it does seem to be something we're continuing to work on. And with respect to these other items, these all look like great projects. The Historical Columbia River Highway, for some reason, that just gets me really excited. I think because it just brings to mind the possibility of kind of this refreshment of our west side, which is not as quaint as maybe other parts of our town, and mixed with some notion of that becoming sort of a bike mecca because it's going to tap into the bike trail that goes down I-84. It just seems like there's a big community plus, a big perhaps even business development plus, and a beautification plus to that kind of gateway concept. So that, I know that's going to be a lot of work and it's going to take many years, but that's really a neat thing, I think, for the long-term vision for our community, and kind of making a part of town that hasn't really been as, I guess, so much of a community synergy as other parts. I think it could really help that part of town. And with respect to safe routes to school, that's also exciting. I think that must be, for the city's perspective, making things safer between May Street and the middle school in particular, which is a difficult traffic pattern for pedestrian walking, but I'm sure there's more to it than that. I know from my role on that ODOT committee that there's a project up in Mid-Valley, because there is that railroad track next to Mid-Valley that has, it's dangerous for kids up there. So I know that's outside the city's jurisdiction, but that project is one that ODOT it's in line to be funded. It didn't get funded because of the STIP reductions last cycle, but there's lots of exciting things on that front. I've heard from parents that have kids that go to West Side that it's difficult for their kids to bike to school because of the busy roads out there. So maybe there's a way to make that safer. I know that's outside the city's jurisdiction, but I think that is a good thing for our city to be thinking about, is the safety of our community's children as they go to and from school.
Thanks, Eric. I'm hearing that we are in agreement with all of the projects under this one. And adding just, that we're working on implementing the parking plan. So Gladys?
As Councilor Haney is bringing up the schools and outside of our area, I imagine that we would all want to see something that we will continue to work with the county specifically on some of these. Again, not taking ownership, but how do we just collaborate with the county on maybe they're replicating us, we're replicating them, but that we're just continuing that partnership together.
Okay. Tim?
Sorry, Mayor, I get skipped there.
Oh, sorry, Tim. I'm so sorry.
which is understandable because I'm out of coffee as well. But anyways, I guess my comments are, I do have, agree with what everybody said, and these are obviously good projects. But questions for Rachel. So what is the timeline to develop the timeline with ODOT?
Thank you very much, Councilor. We should have something back from them, and I see Dustin was on earlier. So Dustin, maybe you can jump in here, make sure I get this right. But we do have some preliminary designs, so we should be able to get back to you within the next couple of months. Dustin, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, ODOT just finished up contracts last month with the project. So, and we had our first internal staff meeting to identify some stakeholders. So we're about one meeting into project identification. So within the next month, it's going to kick off and it's going to go fast. But I'm hoping to have more information to share soon. So we're just getting in the scoping stage right now. Literally.
And the timeline will be included in that.
Yep.
In that conversation.
Great, thank you. I guess another timeline question, for the fixed local bus route. It's always great to see kind of an endpoint in these arrows, the install stops in 2021 and 2022. But just to kind of clarify, because sometimes it gets confusing. So when we say Q2, what months or do those refer to?
Counselor, thank you for the question. That's a very important question. We are talking about the calendar year. So quarter 2 is going to
Okay.
be April, May, June timeframe.
Perfect. And so then the 2021, 22, does that refer to next fiscal year?
That would refer to this is all calendar year. Policy making runs on a calendar year. So hopefully we'll get some stops in by the end of this calendar year, and then certainly into 22, 23. Again, that will be, in partnership with CAT. The city won't be doing those installations, but that's a general timeline.
Perfect. Thanks for that clarification. And the final arrow here, I'm kind of arrow focused on this particular item. The financial gap analysis is kind of an endpoint, seems like an odd endpoint. Can you indicate for the Safe Routes to School? Can you convey how that actually translates into actionable projects?
Yeah, thanks. I would think about it as a capital improvement plan, similar to a capital improvement plan. So we'll have a list of projects. We'll have some identified resources or potential resources, probably grant funding. And then we could have a conversation about what else we might need to do if there were projects that we wanted to get accomplished.
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Great, thanks. Well, we've been at it for an hour and a half, and we have another hour and a half to go. So I think that this should be a great time to take a 10-minute break. People need a rest, a bit of food or whatever. So we'll meet back here at 10:10. Oh, that was great. Oh.
Thank you.
All right. I have 10:10, so we'll get started again. We're chugging through these. Thank you, everyone, being very succinct on all this. A well-maintained community is our next category with, looks like we've got 3 projects: system development charge study, public safety and community services facility, and water and sewer line reconstruction project. So these are, I'd say that these are, we're talking above the iceberg things, but I'd say that a lot of this is really below the iceberg stuff. Bigger projects we haven't taken on, or maybe ongoing studies we need to continue to do all the time. But it could also be below the iceberg, but absolutely necessary stuff to keep the community maintained and functioning. So
and Mayor, there will be some very important policy considerations that we'll be bringing to the City Council. So that is the reason that they're on the work plan, not to mention the fact that they're potentially disruptive to the community, and also a large portion of what the organization works on. But certainly some very important policy questions that we'll be asking you this year and for years to come.
Great. So let's go along with these. Mark?
Yeah, good stuff. Just a couple of questions. If we reopen like construction excise tax and other tools and carrots to help fund attainable housing, is that in here, or is it? I think it's down in the weeds, but I just want to make sure.
Thanks for the question, Counselor. Let me make sure I understand it. There is certainly a tie between the system development charge study in terms of affordability and the housing affordability, the affordable housing production study. So we will be talking about all of that.
Right. Okay. That's great. And then, I just, kudos for including the infrastructure improvement stuff on in a very visible place. I think it's a situation where the bully pulpit and just keep ringing the bell about what we're doing, that this is short-term pain and a really big project that's important to the long-term health of the community, that we just got to keep saying that, as opposed otherwise a vacuum gets filled with strange stories. So so good on us for doing that, and I appreciate the focus on that stuff.
Thanks. Gladys?
Thank you. I like what I see on here about the water and sewer line project. I know we're really just about to start it, but I think it's important to talk about just, again, the communication, and to make sure that we're thinking about equitable ways to communicate, even if we are like in a beginning stages, or I guess through all stages of the project, to make sure that it is plain language, summaries, or, all that good stuff.
Jessica?
One question is, because I know we've talked about in March, talking about the utility rates, but that doesn't need to show up on here, I'm guessing, or on the list on page 13.
Thank you. We are anticipating completing that project. So that's why it's not on the 2021 list, but thank you. Yes, in March, we will be hopefully wrapping up that project with a series of conversations with City Council on utility rates, and also on affordability options, low-income assistance in our utility rates. And then we will have a conversation, then we will have do a project on system development charges.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. And just also to kind of echo what the mayor said at the beginning, I think it's it does seem like we have a backlog of just maintenance for our water, wastewater, stormwater projects. And so I appreciate Rachel taking a focus on this and adding it to this plan too, to make it more visible, like Mark said.
Kim?
Thanks, Mary. Again, these are all good projects. And I think maybe it's just me, but I can really see the utility of actually creating a figure where we actually depict the interrelationships of these projects and amongst these different categories. Because I think, like for the first one, it obviously is related to the first big category, and I think it would be interesting and informative to understand how these are all interconnected and how they affect one another. But that just could be me. It just could be. I guess maybe just the way my brain works. I do, again, like the arrows, but for the last one, somehow I find the last bullet kind of unsatisfying. The endpoint being the financial analysis. And I'm sure that there is some more definable endpoint to that than that indicates.
Counselor, I appreciate that feedback. That will be a touch point with council, which is why it's on there, but we can certainly add in an implementation timeline that would extend for the next many years. That's a good communication point. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So yeah, these are all great. And again, I agree with everybody. It's so important and functional and a purpose of the city that great to communicate these things and have this elevated to that, to be on a work plan like this. But, again, looking at how these things actually, affect how we interact with our environment too, is always something that I think about. So when you start to talk about water and sewer lines and stormwater runoff and the like, I always think about, how those interplay with the last bullet, which is having an environmentally sustainable community.
Thanks, Tim. Eric?
Yeah.
So thank you, Mayor. These are some big projects, 11 and 12. I mean, aren't those are probably each 10 million plus. This is a lot of work. I mean, some cities might just call this their work plan and leave it at those two. So I just want to recognize how big these are. For the sewer and water line project, we'll probably, that'll probably be important for us to emphasize how important that is for our infrastructure in the city, protecting our wastewater treatment plant down at the port, which I understand if this isn't done properly, puts that very important institution at risk in some fashion. So we're really focusing on our city's infrastructure, which in some ways is our first duty as a city. So I think we have to do that. I wish we didn't have to do it. We probably all wish we branded in that broad way. And my sense is that the council is going to, we have work we need to do on that. That's our own work. That's different than what staff has to do, working with the county commission to hopefully make that joint effort pull off. So I reference that only to say, to the extent we're keeping a side list of the things that we need to do as council, it seems like there's more work for us to do on 11 than simply set policy. We need to advocate, get involved, and work with our peers and other boards to try to push that forward.
Thanks, Eric. Megan?
Yeah, all three of these are really important projects. They're certainly critical to the operations of the city and community. To Eric's point, a lot of them are some very big bites, so I'm glad we're starting them. Actually, and honestly, to Tim's point of the interconnectedness and everything, I think that's both these projects and every other thing. I think it's important for us to remember all of the overlapping and sometimes competing and connected goals we have as a community. I honestly feel like it's that conspiracy theory board where there's strings connecting everything into a giant spider web if we were to actually map it out. But we do need to kind of keep that in our head of how everything plays with everything else. But for these projects, I think they're great, and I'm glad we're doing them.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I think these are great projects. They're big projects. There are things that we need to do. I did notice in some of the comments that we got or suggestions from the community that probably some of those comments were made prior to us deciding to put a hold on the city only possibility for a police station down on the Columbia lot. And, kind of, I think they were maybe believing that we were going to take parking away and we were going forward with that, but we're not. But I think it's possible that a lot of those comments that went that direction were made prior to us making our final decision to work with the county. So I'm just stating that in this meeting so people would know that maybe that had made those comments, that we have gone a different direction and that we want to increase parking capacity downtown, and we are going to work with the county on that project. So it's, in this work plan, but people may not have known that prior. I don't have any other comments on that one. I think everyone else covered that really well. I'm in agreement with the projects and the goal. Environmentally sustainable community. We've got wastewater treatment plant cogen feasibility, hybrid vehicles and charging, and city facility energy assessment. And I think that's kind of that one's a continuation from what we've been working on previously with the fleet. So let's see, Tim?
Thanks, Mayor. Again, these are all really good projects. I'm particularly excited about the wastewater treatment plant cogen discussion. Because my understanding is that the wastewater treatment plant is a significant source of energy use for the city, and using it to generate energy would be just a fantastic thing. The hybrid vehicles and charging, again, that's great. Looking at reducing the effects of our fleet on emissions is great. One of the things that I've been thinking about is that, it's going to be a while before some of our bigger vehicles are able to be electric. Some of our snow plows and stuff like that, and which are, I guess to the best of my understanding, probably diesel vehicles. Wade, can you speak to that?
Who were you asking, Tim?
We have a mix. I'm sorry, go ahead, Wade or
The
Mark.
majority of them are gasoline. There are some diesel, yes.
One of the things, especially for the diesel vehicles, and I think I had an exchange with Wade earlier on this year that we partner with the county as far as fueling our vehicles. Is that correct, Wade?
We no longer fuel at the county. We found it was more economical to around.
So we just fuel our vehicles at like gas stations and stuff.
Yes, it's at Hood River Supply. We have an account there.
Well, there's a new type of diesel called renewable diesel that could potentially, in the short term, kind of reduce our carbon footprint. And so I'm just kind of throwing that out there as something to think about going forward. It's a different type of diesel made in a different way that as far as the carbon footprint is drastically reduces the effect on the environment. So that's interesting. I think, obviously the city facility energy assessments, that's great in making progress towards our climate pledge. I think there maybe are some other smaller things that we could do, like working with the high school students to take their climate pledge and working with them. I think one of the benefits of working with the high school students, again, is to interact with the younger people in our community, value their input, and also encourage them to continue to think about reducing our effects on the climate. So those are sort of some additional thoughts, but in general, I'm pleased to see these items on the work plan.
Thanks, Tim.
Mayor, may I interrupt?
Go ahead.
I think it's a great suggestion to bring other types of fuel into the hybrid vehicles and charging conversation. So I'd have no concern with adding that. That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mark?
Thank you. I like it. I have a couple things. One is, we have this ongoing work with the street trees and the tree ordinances stuff that just started the last meeting. And it sort of feels like that fits in here, this category somehow.
I think that's a question to me. Thanks, Counselor, for that question. The direction we got is to weave that into other code updates. So when we're talking about incentives for, whatever it is, housing, et cetera, to weave those in. So that's our plan right now. You're right, it doesn't show up, but that has not gotten lost.
Right, and yeah, I think most of my comment is related to bully pulpit and communicating what we're doing, and to me, there's some advantages of including it, even if it's just a pointer to we're working on that stuff in there. Similarly, carbon footprint. We have the big resolution to reduce our footprint by, what was it, 80% by 35? Is that?
Net zero.
Yeah, oh, I got it right. That's amazing. I think that telling the community through this that we're continuing to monitor and work on improving, just that. It fits into a couple of these different things. So maybe it's just a sentence within the energy assessments or one of those things. And then my third comment is the EV item number 14. I would love to see us not spend a lot of bandwidth, but try to leverage partnerships with the electric companies to have EV infrastructure that's beyond just the city fleet. If we're going to work on a parking lot, if we're going to, maybe it gets into other things that, Chevrolet announced this week that by 2035, they're going to not make gas powered cars anymore. Whether you believe that or not, I don't know, but I think that the writing's on the wall, and it's going to be starting to think about EV infrastructure beyond city fleet. I think is going to be important as well. And I'm not suggesting we do something about it, but just recognizing it within the text and looking for opportunities that sort of show up is a smart thing to do.
Great. Yep. Citywide electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. That's it.
Megan?
Yeah, I'm supportive of all three projects. I think they're great steps forward on working towards our goals and plans for the future. This is actually, I think, more just for council than the larger work plan. But I know we're continuing to participate in the Energy Council, and I would like us to find out how to be more effective at that partnership as we're going forward. So I'm just going to throw that out there.
All right, Gladys?
Thank you. I like what I see, and I do have some comments or suggestions about a couple. As we're having these as I'm hearing folks of let's add in the carbon resolution, how are we going to partner? How are we bringing the community? How are we also partnering with folks to, as we're thinking about this like assessment phase, that we're thinking of potential economic growth opportunities within our local community? So I just want to put that out there.
Eric?
I think all these projects are consistent with the energy plan and the council climate pledge. So I like what I see here. I know I've often thought that our city water treatment plant is maybe the single most important physical asset that the city has. Because just imagine the city without that, it would just be a huge problem. So turning this into some sort of net gain energy, having an energy component that's a positive rather than a negative somehow would make them down at the plant even more of an unsung hero of our community. So I think that sounds like a great idea. And the hybrid vehicles and charging, I like Mark's comment about making sure we keep the bigger picture, not just municipal, and also making sure that this isn't just an optics thing, that we're really making decisions based on true calculated determinations that it's going to be either a net energy savings or a cost savings, not just an optics because we want to look like we're doing this. We want it to be something that moves the needle, because there probably will be sacrifices with this. There might be parking space losses depending on where these units go or don't go. Involving, you know, some sort of private partnership is going to be important, because there's a lot of private owned land that might be able to facilitate this more than public owned land. So, but I think it's a great list and consistent with our previously stated council goals.
Thanks, Eric. Jessica?
The only question I would have, kind of based on some of the comments in the public thing, and I don't see this as being a project to list, but the recycling discussion and how do we encourage, you know, our recycler to find ways to take more items. And I don't really see us having a lot of clout or ability to change that. And I know we will have that conversation every year when he comes back for a rate adjustment. And I know, you know, Kevin's on a working group to talk about that. But just to recognize that that is a conversation that I expect us to have, you know, at least once a year, to say, we want you to take more recycling stuff, even if there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay. I agree that the wastewater treatment plant is, you know, that will save us more money than anything else if we could do something more down there that's more energy efficient, because it's our largest bill that we have every month. So just from a financial standpoint, it's important to try and find other ways to work down there. And the hybrid vehicle and charging is, you know, continue on with that. And the city facilities, if we can make them more energy efficient, it's just going to save us more money that we'll have to do other things with. So that's fantastic. The only thing that's not on the list that probably wouldn't be happening this year, but I'm just going to mention it because I think it's going to happen maybe next year, is that the state is going to look at what's called a REACH code, building code. And there may be adopting that, or they won't be adopting it. They'll be having their regular code updates that they do, but they may develop a REACH code for the state that cities or counties can adopt. And it won't be mandatory, but it could be incentivized somehow by a city or a county if a builder's willing to go to that code when they build. And so that's going to be coming up. And I think the Energy Council is probably going to ask the city to just say, hey, we think it's a good thing if the state would develop it. You know, we don't have to adopt it, even if we say that, but they may be asking us just for an endorsement letter. And I think that will be coming down the pike in the next 18 to 24 months. So that's the only other thing on this for me. And last but absolutely not least, adequate parks and open space. We know it's important. We know our constituents think it's important. We think it's important. And, you know, as a partner with the Parks Master Plan that we have adopted, this, you know, capital improvement plan for parks and implementation measures, you know, that's huge for the city to have this on our plan this year. So let's go with Eric.
Yes, that is huge. I'm reminded of the pretty green circles on the west side plan and the parks plan, and which are beautiful circles, but turning those pretty green conceptual circles into actual park that doesn't become pavement or something else, that gives a place for the children and families that will live in those new areas, a place to go, is going to be really important. So this will be a hard task. The money part's always the hardest part, whether it's the form of a bond measure or tapping into the costs and fees imposed upon developers at the time of construction, and then sequencing all that so that we have the money and time to buy the land before the development's in, so the development doesn't get put in before the parks can not be there. It's hard, and there's a lot of advanced planning and effort that needs to go into that to make sure the parks actually happen, because it's really easy to put the green circles on the maps, but it's harder to actually get the parks. So focusing on the capital improvement plan, coordinating, I also see a number of bonds coming down the pipe for the community, whether it's the public safety and community health facility that we were talking about earlier. The sheriff had one recently, the parks one, maybe there'll be one for affordable housing. I'm not sure. There's a lot. So we have to be strategic in our sequencing as well, to the extent we're going to the community for more dollars. Particularly in light of COVID, where people may not have the ability to say yes as much as they used to, those kinds of things. But it's probably going to be some form of bond measure for parks. I think that is the right thing to do. And we need to be as proactive as we can be to secure funding for the pretty green circles to make them a reality, is my feeling.
Thanks, Eric. Jessica?
I really like this project. I'm glad we're looking to make the plan a reality. I am also glad just to recognize that city staff is actively looking for opportunities now, and I've appreciated them, so we're not waiting until we have this implementation plan done to try to identify properties when they become available. So thank you to staff for doing that. Yeah, I think that's what I had to say.
Thanks. Tim?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Just can you continue my arrow critique? The options analysis could be stated in a more actionable fashion. Just to be consistent.
Yes, thank you, Counselor. Well, we will come up with something. I appreciate it. It's important that we get those pieces clear. So your feedback is well received. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just to loop back to the last thing that we discussed, I forgot to mention this, that there was a suggestion in the public comments to include the word resilience in that in the environmental sustainability community category. And I think resilience is a very powerful word, and we might want to consider adding that or exchanging that for sustainable, because it does have a very tangible meaning. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Mark?
Thank you. I want to amplify on what Eric was saying, and it's consistent with some stuff that Rachel and I have had the opportunity to talk about, which is acquisition of easements and open space land is absolutely the first thing we need to do. We can develop them later, but if we don't have the land now, whether it's the greenways or the little parks places, we're not gonna have the option to develop them. So I do think that working with parks to get access to their current SDC funding is going to be really important, and that's partly a political task to make sure that us as counselors make sure that they as park district board members know that that's now's the time to be working together to acquire land. What Jessica said, the fact that staff has already been looking for opportunities is heartening. I like it. I think Rand Road is a neat opportunity. It's comes into play here to some degree. So I don't have any changes to how number 16 is presented here, but I really hope that we can clear some things to allow staff to actually start nicking away at this. There were a lot of comments in the comment book about different parts of this as well. So I think that it goes, it puts our activity where our words were when we did the master plan. So I think that it's also important to, actually do these things as opposed to just have a pretty plan. So that's it.
Thanks, Mark. Gladys?
I will echo everything that my peers have said. I think they've all said it so beautifully. I just want to also mention my appreciation for parks in general, especially now more than ever. Being able to just take my kids, close to where we live to the park, and making sure that we're safe, of course, but just to be able to see them sitting on the swing, or just to, I don't know, to go walk somewhere. I feel like absolutely, I will admit that I've taken parks for granted. So very thankful that we have them in our community.
Thanks, Gladys. Megan?
Yeah, I want to say I've been really appreciative of the work staff doing at the operational level on all of this, including, improving communication and partnerships over the last year or two. I think that, this actual project is obviously a really important and great next step to have a game plan to direct our work and the city's work, and is critical to, grant funding and other funding acquisition efforts. So it's clearly the next step, and I'm glad we're doing it.
Great. Yeah, I agree. I think if we have something that I will call a shadow plat of the west side, because that's where we wanted to add the additional parks that aren't, areas that aren't built out already, which is just something like, okay, Sherman Street's going to go all the way through, or May Street goes all the way through, or this street won't go all the way through. This is going to be a bigger street. This is going to be a smaller street. Then we can start to identify where we can put these green spots, and we can actually start talking to landowners. So I think that's critical. I think we need the money to do it, whether it's us or STC money that Parks and Recs have acquired. But to partner with Parks and Rec on that is critical. And we need to identify those spots, because the price is just going to continue to rise, and we need to do something about it sooner than later. Just like we did with Rand Road, we're identifying these areas, and we need to move on them if we possibly can. And I know it's difficult with COVID. Some of the incomes that the city had year before last, we don't quite have back yet, and we probably won't for at least another year, or maybe even 2 years. But we'll come back, and we need to be thinking of the future on these things. So really important. Mark?
Yeah, I failed to underline another thing Eric talked about, which is the bond measure, and 2022 is going to be a high vote turnout election, and I think we should start talking about it. My favorite daydream is some combination capital bond that would be for land acquisition, for housing, and for open space, possibly other things. So, but this isn't the time to talk about what that looks like. But I think that just putting it on the radar that it's an important tool to get a bunch of these different things we're talking about implemented, and just keeping that on the radar.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder, Mark, on that. I think that it's never too early to start talking about, if we're going to have some kind of a bond measure, what would it be for, and how would it look, and what partners do we have that would help us with that? So I I think that that might be something we would need to talk about in the context of at least the parks, and maybe adding some other things to that within the next year, some kind of discussion. Rachel, do you see that that would come under this parks here, what you've got down here?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mayor. And a number of counselors have hit on it. The city does not collect a parks SDC. And that is typically what would be used to acquire parkland that adds to capacity. So, and that can provide, be a good source of matching funds for grants, but the city does not collect. So we really will need to partner in order to get to accomplish our goals. We really will need to partner on that. So I appreciate all the recognition there. The purpose of the capital improvement plan is to identify the list of projects and then have a conversation about where the funding gaps are.
So the financial analysis would be the portion where we would talk about partnering with Parks and Rec, whether we would have a bond, those kind of things would come into that conversation.
Right. Where are the gaps? Where are the financial gaps?
Right.
And what are the options for filling them?
Okay, great. Fantastic. All right. We have made it through all of our projects. Does anyone have thoughts now that we've talked about all of these and additional questions? Robust conversation on all of these. So thank you so much. Jessica?
I had a question on the one of the under the other with the COVID support. We talk about the parklets. I don't know if we are planning to talk about food carts because I know we've had challenges with our food cart rules.
Thank you, Counselor. We agree that there are challenges with the food cart rules. It is not something that we would have the capacity to take on right now in terms of the code update. So that's on the sort of future council work plan list. The other category, I just, those were placeholders just to recognize that we are doing this work, continued COVID support and management. And then of course the Heights project, not something for the council work plan, but just an acknowledgement of the work there.
Gladys?
I have concerns about food carts not being on here at all as well. And we know that that is an opportunity for folks with additional income, and a majority of the food cart owners are BIPOC individuals. So that's concerning to me, and I don't know what to, it's just concerning to me as that's not an equitable opportunity.
So food carts are allowed in our code right now. They are just allowed, there's, I think there's a lot of conversation to be had about how council wants to see those in the environment long term. So they are allowed. We do have food carts. Where I think there's been some complication is on permanent installations of food carts, and that's what the conversation is going to be about. So it's actually a pretty big policy project that at some point council can decide to take on.
And to jump, I was sorry, recognizing that if we did that, we'd have to take something else off. I'm definitely fine with leaving that to a future year.
Megan, did you have your hand up?
Yes, and I maybe this is clarifying Jessica and Gladys's question, but there's the larger food cart code and how we work with them long term, and then I think that we did a little work of just COVID relief work, and I guess did we I mean, we're obviously out of the emergency. Are we continuing some of that, or are they just operating as they have under normal code pre-COVID?
Thank you, Counselor. you know, and I'm going to have to go back. The direction we received was to bring something back to allow them to stay. So we can certainly have that conversation, and I'll just have to refresh my memory on where we're at with that. What I was referring to was the bigger conversation, the bigger policy work about food carts. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, because I guess you know, when we're talking COVID relief, I'd certainly want to make sure we're not dropping that. And thank you for saying that we haven't. And then yes, the larger code I think is something for a future conversation for sure.
So I think what we're talking about, just to clarify one more time, is we allowed the food carts last year because of COVID-19 to stay where they were. Normally they have to move every 6 months to some other spot, you know, 420 Blackbirds trades with El Cuate, or, you know, whatever they do. So we allowed them just to stay because they, you know, the health department's having issues doing anything else besides COVID and doing inspections. And that's what we're still going to continue to address, as we aren't out of COVID-19 yet. But the larger question is the question of whether those food carts should have to move every 6 months. So that just to clarify what that was, so people that are listening know what we're talking about. Tim, did you have something?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. It pertains to the Heights Urban Renewal category, and you know, when we were discussing the transportation category, one of the things that, you know, obviously came to my mind was the Heights. So, Rachel, can you just, I'm kind of assuming that it falls into a different category, like maybe the urban renewal part of the program, why it's not specifically on what plan?
Yes, Counselor, you're correct. That's in this, you know, it's a separate board. So it is separate from the city council's work. But if I'm hearing you correctly, there will be a tie. I'm thinking of your graphic now, right?
Yep.
If I could figure it out, I would. But there, on a future council work plan, I would imagine there would be some implementation measures, for example, transportation system plan update that would help implement whatever comes out of the urban renewal plan.
Yeah, you know, and I get that, and maybe we should, and just so the public understands it better, maybe kind of point that out somehow, because I'm sure that some folks are probably wondering.
Point out, and just to make sure, point out that the Urban Renewal Agency is working on these various projects, or point out that in the future there will be likely be a transportation system plan update.
Probably both. I mean,
okay.
You know, with respect to the, or to maybe just suggest that there are other projects going on within the urban renewal.
Yeah, sure, we can do that. Let me think about how to do that. Thanks very much. It's good feedback.
And I'm thinking of the West Side Plan, which it was similar, where we had roads and we had trails, so we had, and parks. So we had parks and rec involved. We had the transportation system involved. And so we took that, all of that on as one big project. And then as the planning department got through each of those sections, they split those off. And so then part of it will be added to the transportation system plan, and part of it will be added to the, you know, parks plan. So this would be similar, where we had urban renewal, we'll come up with some things. Part of those will be added to the transportation system plan. Part of those will go into capital facilities work. You know, it's somewhat similar to how we did the West Side Plan, where we do a big plan and then each little section gets broken off into its proper category. I mean, I know it's hard for the public because it's like, well, let's do that part and get it done. But it's like, well, no, we do the planning for it, and then it goes off into a different category to be financed and to get the work done.
Mayor, I want to make sure we addressed the food cart issue. Is there consensus that addressing it via COVID support is sufficient for this year? Was that, okay.
I think I
Great.
saw
Thank
head
you.
nods. Yes,
Yeah,
everybody's.
yeah, and I'll clarify. I just not seeing it on there. I thought it wasn't happening, and so that's why I addressed a concern.
Great, thank you.
Right. Eric?
I just had a question about that because I shared Councilor Rivera's concern about what I heard her concern to be is possibly shutting those down. But I understand that that 6-month issue was extended, but I wasn't sure if, are we agreeing that we're extending it again? Where does that land for now? Are we shutting down any food carts during the COVID era because it's continuing?
What I have heard is that we'll continue to let them stay there without moving. And what I need to check on is whether that, I just can't remember if we've actually done that yet or not, but we'll bring that back.
Okay, good, thank you. I'd be supportive of extending that.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe I might be jumping the gun, but I just had a couple little things that I don't see in here that I don't know where they belong, and maybe they're covered by one thing or another. So is this a good time to bring them up, Kate?
This is the perfect time. You know, we've gotten through everything. So if there's other things that we missed or you have comments about right now, it's great.
So the first thing is just relationships with the, Downtown Business Association and the Heights Business Association, which both might be fictional things right this second, but just making sure that those continue to stay, that we're feeding those relationships. And I know staff is doing that, and I think that it's going well, but just recognizing that during these annual work plans seems smart. And then second is we had done this 17, 18, 19, we partnered with CAT to do this trolley system. And in 20, I thought we were going to take it on ourselves and instead decided to entertain this pandemic thing. So is that show up in 21 again, or could it, or is it wait till 22 and we're past all this stuff?
I think the answer to all of those statements is yes, possibly. Thank you for bringing it up. That has not been on our radar, so certainly something we can start talking to Kat about. Yeah, and I'm not proposing it as a major thing. I'm just sort of like, where does that fit in here, kind of thing. So. Yep, understood. We'll circle back on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was so excited when they had the community pass. I went out and got my community pass, and then, COVID like 3 weeks later. It's like, oh. So kind of disappointing. Anxious to get back to somewhat normal so we can all be running the bus together. Other comments, questions? Gladys?
I did write the trolley as well, especially right now with of course, transportation is always a barrier, but with the importance that some, organizations are administering vaccines, that continues to come up that those who are receiving vaccines definitely need rides. So maybe just partnering with what we have or letting an agency borrow the trolley. I don't know, but just using the trolley to help folks get to and from during COVID.
Jessica?
As a transit operator myself, I will say that there's a ton of cleaning that happens on the buses, and they are perfectly safe for everybody to ride right now. And also that they are transporting people to get COVID shots right now. The link is, and I'm sure Kat is too.
Thanks, Jessica. Anything else? Anyone else? Great. We got a lot of comments, and this is, I'm thinking into next year, but hopefully we'll all be able to meet in person next year. We may think about having a facilitator. We may think about doing surveys in a different way. So there might be some changes next year to make the process a little bit different, a little bit more robust. And, but I think it went really well this year. I think we talked about every single subject. Everyone got their 2 cents in on you like it, like changes, whatever. So I think it went really well. I still think it's a very ambitious set of goals. And Rachel feels confident in being able to get these done or move them to where they need to be by the end of the year, even if they aren't going to be finished by any means on some of these. So, you know, for those listening, we won't get every single thing done on this list. Some will go into 2022 and beyond. But we strive to make as much progress as we can on all of these goals, and Rachel feels confident that we should have enough funding to do most everything we have on here. So thank you, Rachel, for taking on all this.
And Mayor, many of these are multi-year projects. I mean, so we talk about something like the water and sewer line reconstruction project. That's going to be on your work plan every year. And we talk, you know, or a Rand Road, you know, that is not something that will be done. So I really appreciate the recognition of that. These are big projects. Many of them will be multi-year. But what I think we can do is provide updates to the community and to the organization and about where we are on each of them.
Great, great. Others? Gladys?
I was just going to bring up that comment that Rachel just brought up. They're going to take some time, and it'd be really nice to just inform our community members of what's going on, even if they are going to take a couple of years, and that we do so, I don't know, a quarterly, 6 months. I don't know what that looks like, but that there's just updates, like a one-pager.
All right. Others? Tim?
I just wanted to take a brief moment to thank Rachel and all the rest of the city staff for their hard work getting this plan together, and for all the work that they're going to do to implement it. So it's much appreciated, and thank you very much.
All right. I think we could be done a few minutes early. So thank you everyone for spending your morning here. Rachel has her marching orders and we have ours, and we have, I just want to urge you that if Rachel asks you to come in to meet with her individually, it's all good. And please do, because there's a lot of explanation for a lot of things that are going on that we can get through if you do get some high level detail prior to us getting to our full meeting. So please give her the time of day if she asks for it. I would really, really appreciate that. I know it's more time for us, but we have an ambitious work plan, and that's one of the ways that we can get through everything we need to do this year. So thank you, everyone.
Mayor, if I could just say one more next step. So our next step is to finalize this document and then to bring it back to the City Council for adoption, probably on February 22nd. And just again, thank you very much for your time today, for your ongoing support. We really appreciate it. And we will see you Monday at 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. Don't forget, 1 hour early for the presentation from Eco Northwest. And I have emailed each of you to get your evaluations back to me. So don't forget to work on those. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, staff. This is great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good Saturday.
Yeah, you too.